Hi, everybody. So I thought I would come on here and finally film my birth story. So, as you can see, Evelyn is taking a nap, and conditions haven't been perfect to do this or film this, but kind of hard to find the perfect time with a newborn. But I'm going to give this a whirl and see how it goes. So, first of all, I want to preface this birth story by saying that I had a completely amazing pregnancy, and I am super grateful for that. I wasn't really ever sick. I didn't really have any symptoms. I had some cravings here and there, but I was able to work out the entire time. The only limitation I had was from week 20 to 28. I had a low lying placenta, so I couldn't do any high impact activities, including running. So pretty much since 20 weeks, I had stopped running. But other than that, I was strength training 3 to 4 times a week. I was walking my dogs 1 to 2 miles every day. I was swimming. I was so active, literally up until the day that I had Evelyn. So I stopped working on Thanksgiving. My due date was December 2nd, 2022. And for the most part, my birth plan was I wanted to do things as naturally as possible. So I really wanted to go into birth on my own. I didn't want to be induced. I didn't want to have any medication. I just kind of wanted to let nature run its course. So, really leading up to her due date, I felt like a lot of stress and like pressure that like why isn't the baby here? And I had people asking me pretty much from 37 weeks on if there was any baby yet. And I know that most first-time moms don't have their baby until like 40 to 42 weeks, somewhere around there. And my mom was late with my oldest brother. She was like just shy of 42 weeks with my brother. And I had had a pregnancy like my mom. So I'm like, if I'm anything like my mom, I will be late with my first. But the only thing my mom also had very short labors. So I think her longest was with Richie, the oldest, and it was 8 hours. So I'm like, well, if I'm anything like my mom, I'll have really short labors. And that was not the case. So if this is a long video, this is why. So I had like about a 30-hour labor. So I started getting contractions at 3 o'clock in the morning on December 8th, Thursday, December 8th, which is my cousin's birthday, Nicole. So I was like, oh my gosh, like starting to have contractions, and I was excited. I was like, my baby and Nicole are going to share a birthday. But I was like, let's see if these contractions go anywhere. So they started around 3 o'clock in the morning. They were about 30-ish minutes apart. The first like four were, but I was like, these could be Braxton Hicks, because I had some days of like contractions that would like start and stop. So I was just waiting to see like if these would continue. So I knew my husband, Matt, would be up around 5:30 to go work out. So I was like, I'm not going to wake him. I'll wait till he wakes up. So he woke up at 5:30, and I told him like, I've been having cramping ever since about 3, just so go work out, do your thing. So, and honestly, I think I was actually texting with Nicole, because I think she was up really early because I think her kids were awake, and it was her birthday. So I wished her happy birthday. And I had told her that I had started cramping, and these cramps were pretty mild, like just period like cramps, but pretty consistent. So when my mom woke up at 7, I was still having these cramps, right? So 4 hours later. So I told my mom that I was cramping, and she's like, well, should I go to work or what should I do? And I was like, no, go to work. I have an appointment at 9, and like, we'll see if this keeps up, which it did. So pretty much from 5 o'clock in the morning on, they were about 10 to 15 minutes apart. So I go to my appointment at 9 o'clock, and after my 40-week due date, I had to have an NST, non-stress test, and ultrasound every 3 days. That was just their protocol. So I went in for an NST and ultrasound. The ladies were like laughing at me because I was still pregnant. At this point, I'm almost 41 weeks pregnant. It was 6 days past my due date. So they're laughing at me as I'm like having contractions in the office. They're like, you're having this baby today. And I was like, we'll see. So go for the ultrasound. Fluid looks great. Get the non-stress test. Baby's doing great. At this point, I'll say baby because we don't know if we're having a boy or a girl. And so the physician's assistant came in, and she's like, just at this point, we would send you to the hospital since you're having more than 6 contractions in an hour. And she did an internal at this time, and I was 70% effaced, and 3 centimeters dilated. And I had only had like one cervical check before that, and I think I was like 1 centimeter dilated and 50% effaced or something like that. I can't really remember. But yeah, so just like a side note, cervical checks after your 36 weeks are kind of pointless, and it's perfectly normal to not be dilated at all when you're 39, 40 weeks, like perfectly normal. So if you're pregnant and you're going through this, like please know you can decline cervical checks. I pretty much did up until 40 weeks because I was like, I could go from 0 to 100 in a day. So what's the point? So, which I should have remembered later on in my labor, but we'll get there. So I told her that I really wanted to go home and labor on my own for as long as I could until things picked up. So she was fine with that, and she sent me home. Get home, and I'm just laboring at home. And I texted with my doula, texting back and forth. She told me to relax, get in the bath, maybe go for a walk if I could, because it was kind of nice that day. I was too amped up. Like by this time, I've been in labor for 6, 7 hours. I had been having cramps, right? 6, 7 hours. So I was like excited. I'm like, this is the day. Like just all the anticipation, all of the, excitement. I was just like, I was too excited to sleep, even though I got no sleep because Matthew was snoring like crazy the night before. So I only got like 3 hours of sleep because I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning with contractions. So I'm just laboring at home. And again, they were like 10-ish minutes apart. Sometimes they were 8 minutes, 6 minutes. They were kind of all over the place for a really long time. So I watched some episodes of Friends. I had some soup. I was drinking lots of water, staying very hydrated. I was trying to take a nap, couldn't really take a nap. I was just too amped up, too worked up. I got in the bath and that helped. My contractions actually went away when I was in the bath. So then I was like worried, like, oh no, like maybe I stopped it. Like just all of the things. Like birth is wild. So just didn't know what to expect. And the cramps weren't terrible. Like I could talk through them, breathe through them, and I knew it was still early. Things didn't really start to pick up until around like 2 p.m. And again, like my contractions were so sporadic. They'd be like 6 minutes, 3 minutes, 8 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes. Like it was crazy. This little girl. So it just was hard to be like, when should I go to the hospital? So I was just in contact with my doula all day. So finally by like 5 p.m., it had been an hour of like 3 to 4 minutes apart. Pretty consistent. They didn't ever go back up to like 10 minutes apart. So I was like, okay, they've been pretty consistent for an hour, over an hour. It's probably like 2 hours. So it's like, okay, like we should probably like think about leaving. So they were starting to get more intense. They were starting to get to the point where like I couldn't really like talk through them. I had to concentrate on my breath. And I remember my sister took an Uber from the city because she was like, I can't work, I'm too excited. So she took an Uber. I'm like, this could be a while. Like, I'm not making any promises. This baby's coming tonight. So I hugged my mom and I was crying because at this point I'm getting I've been in labor since 3 o'clock in the morning. So it's been over 12 hours. And I just remember hugging my mom and saying, like, if I get to the hospital and I'm only at like a 5, I'm going to die. So I laugh about it now. It's taken me a while to process all of this. So get to the hospital and like I'm having to like hold onto the wall while I'm having contractions, breathing through them. So the ER nurse or whatever comes and takes me right back. I didn't even have to go to triage. So I was like, I'm 41 weeks pregnant, like having contractions. I was here earlier. So they just sent me right to labor and delivery. So they had to do all the check-in things. And because I wanted a low intervention labor, I was hooked up to the monitors, but they were like the cords they put like around my neck because I wanted intermittent fetal monitoring. And I had an IV in my hand, but I didn't have IV fluids because I wanted to be able to move around. So, but they had to do all the things to like check me in. They had to lay me on the bed. And I'm like, do I have to lay down? I just want to stay standing. Like it felt so much better to stand. Also, contractions feel like very intense period cramps, like the most intense period cramps of your life. And I know some women have told me like you'll feel them in your whole entire belly, but I never did. Mine kind of stayed low below my belly button the entire time, like my entire labor. So contractions were super low and super painful. But, like, tried not to think about the pain, tried to breathe through it. Like, I had taken, like, 2 natural birthing classes, but nothing prepares you for how your body is going to respond to the pain, or your mind, for that matter. So they checked me after they checked me in and everything, they checked me, and I was 90% effaced and 4 centimeters dilated. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I was wrecked. Like, I was so upset after that. It, like, totally defeated me. I'm like, I've gone 1 centimeter since 9 o'clock this morning. And honestly, it was really hard to pull me out of that after that. I was so down. I feel like my mind shut my body down. Like, it was very hard after that mentally for me. I was just like, how is my body not progressing? Like, I've been in labor for so long. I was getting exhausted. And Matt was like the greatest coach ever. Like, you can do this. You trained for this. You prepared for this. Nothing trains you or prepares you for this. It was, honestly, I know that your body can go from like 0 to 10 and like 4 to 10, but they tell you like, oh, well, you normally dilate 1 centimeter an hour, which is obviously crap because I'd been in labor since 9 o'clock that morning. There should be a baby here if that was the case. So I was just really frustrated that my body was not progressing. I digress. Continue to breathe in contractions. My doula's there. Things are getting really painful. So it's like 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock at night, labored with the peanut ball. They had a stability ball there, but it was so low to the ground that it was killing me, like killing my contractions. I was like, I was like crunched. I was like, this is way too low to the ground. And my dad's like, I'll go home and get your ball and come back. Like, so my dad literally went home, got my stability ball, and came back. God bless him. So where am I at? So it's like 6 o'clock at night, still laboring. It's getting intense. Honestly, I wish I could have gotten in the shower. Like, I feel like I couldn't have because of those cords that were wrapped around my neck. But I just remember, like, mentally, I was just not in a good place. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm in so much pain. Like, it was getting really hard for me to relax through contractions. I was like tensing, which is not good. Like, when you're in pain, like, our body's natural response is to tense up. And so that's what I kept doing, and it was making it worse. And it was just not good. And then so I'm like, I'm not going to be able to keep doing this. I'm exhausted, like all of the things. I'm like, I need an epidural. Like, I threw up at one point. Like, it was just, I was in so much pain. I was throwing up. And I was just like, I'm not going to keep going like this. Like, I need an epidural. And that was at like, I don't know, 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. But Matt kept like talking me down. And so I was like, you need to call my mom in here. So like my mom came in, and about a week before that, I had lunch with my mom, and she knew my plans. And my mom had 4 unmedicated births and 1 C-section and super short labors. Lucky her. But she had said to me, she's like, don't be a martyr. Like, if you need pain medication, get it. And I was like, I know. But it was very hard for me. Like, because I'm so headstrong to admit that, like I couldn't do it anymore. And it was more just my mind kept telling me I couldn't do it. I think that's the most frustrating part. Is like, I feel like if I kept telling myself, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, like, I would have done it. But like, I just mentally shut myself down. And so I called my mom in, and I said, Mom, I think I need an epidural. Like, I just can't keep going like this. I'm in so much pain. My body's not progressing. And, like, you need your mom when you're there, when you're giving birth, because she knows. And she's just like, honey, like, it's okay. And like rubbing my head. And I'm like, yeah, but like, I feel like I failed. Like, I failed you and Matt, myself, and my baby. And she's like, honey, stop. She's like, you have not failed. She's like, you've been going at this a long time. And she's like, if you need relief, honey, like you need relief. And so finally, by like 10 p.m., I decided I'm getting the epidural. And so my nurse was great. I think her name was Rachel. I told her I wanted the epidural, like, what's the process look like? And she said, well, okay, like, you're not on IV fluids. Like, we need to run a whole IV bag. And then it takes about 20 to 25 minutes to place the epidural. And I'm like, oh my God. And then 20 to 25 minutes for it to take effect. And I was like, oh my God. So I'm doing the math in my head and I'm like, oh my God. So like, I was like, I'm going to throw up because I was in so much pain. So it was like from 10 to midnight. It was like 10 to, right? It took 2 hours to feel relief from the time I was like, okay, I want the epidural. So I'm just trying, and at this point, my contractions are so close together. Like, I don't know, it's like, I blacked it out. I blacked out this pain, but I don't know. They were like a minute apart. Like they were, and I never got like any drugs. So like I didn't have Pitocin to speed things up or anything like that. Cause I'm like, my contractions are already so intense. I don't need I'm going to just like freaking die if I have Pitocin. I was scared. I was scared of the drugs. I was scared of the side effects and all of that. Just from like, I feel like I knew a lot going in. I had researched a lot. So the last they had checked me, I was at like 5.5, and I think that was at like 9 p.m. or something like that. So still not far enough along. So getting the epidural was probably the worst experience of my entire life. Because the guy comes in a little after 11, starts explaining like what could happen. Like, I could paralyze you. Like this crazy, crazy. So you could have a spinal headache. I knew all this. But I was contracting so bad that I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to stay still for this epidural? So my mom and Matt got to stay in the room. So they were sitting on the chairs and I'm like facing them, right? And the nurse like put her hands on my shoulders and she's like, okay, tuck your chin to your chest, round out your spine as much as you can. And I'm like, oh my, do you know how hard it is to round out your spine when you're like contracting every minute? Oh my God. Like, I'm like, this is why women get epidural. Like, before they're in pain. Like, this is horrible. And the guy, like, had to place the epidural 3 times. Not once, not twice, 3 times. He was like, oh, that's not a good spot. Oh, that's not a good spot. And my mom's like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, find the spot. It was horrible. So I'm just like, I don't even know the noises that were coming out of me because I'm just like in so much pain. Matt's like, all you could see were like your little toes, like moving because you couldn't move anything else. And he was like, I was just going to throw up because like just seeing you and like seeing you experience that was like horrible for me. So finally the epidural was placed. By midnight, I started feeling relief. And of course I can't sleep at this point. And we send everybody home. Like my family's there. My mom and my dad, my sister and Matt's parents were there. And I'm like, go home. I said to my mom, go home, like call you if anything's happening, like plan to come back at like 5 or 5:30 in the morning if you don't hear from us, whatnot. So, and yeah, I couldn't sleep with the epidural because I was so upset. I was grieving. I was like, this isn't what I wanted, all of that stuff. Obviously, like, the more important thing was that I get through it and I, healthy mom and healthy baby. And that was honestly, like, I was not healthy, like mentally. I was just like, I need like relief. So Matt slept, but from like 12 to 4, I was just watching the monitor, seeing how the baby was responding to contractions because, they say that the epidural doesn't affect the baby, but I know that's not true. It could. So I was just literally glued to the monitor and I was drinking like crazy, like staying hydrated, crazy hydrated. And plus like the nurse comes in like every hour to check your blood pressure and all that stuff. So by like 4 a.m., I start feeling some like pressure down there. So she comes in and checks me and she's like, you're fully complete. And I was like, oh, and she's like, and that's your water bag that you feel, it's bulging. And I'm like, oh, okay. She's like, I know you didn't want us to break it. Like, do you want us to break it? And I was like, well, yeah, at this point, like, I'm hooked up. I got the drugs. Like, like I have all the things I didn't want, but here we are. birth is crazy. Everybody says take your birth plan, throw it out the window, and they were right. And I knew that like I was not in control of this at all. It was God and my baby. So it's just relinquishing control at this point, surrendering. So we called the family to tell them so everybody could like get back because I didn't know how fast it was going to be once she like broke my water. And so that happened around 5 or 5:30, and there was meconium in it. So she said, you know, when the baby's born, we'll take the baby over to make sure he or she doesn't ingest any of the meconium. Then we'll put the baby back on your chest for, you know, golden hour and whatnot. So at this point, like my doula came back and they had me labor down for a while. So I was at fully effaced 10 centimeters, but they wanted me to like labor the head down further. And so I told them to like lessen my epidural a little bit, like make it less, I mean, I could still feel my legs, which was really good. It was a good epidural. But I wanted to feel like more pressure. So they did that. So I had labored the baby's head down for a while and, you know, got to a point where I was like, okay, like I'm ready. Like, what are we waiting for? Turns out like, I was waiting for like the head OB of the practice really wanted to come in and deliver me. So we were waiting for her to come in. And once she got there around like 9:15. And like we talked a little bit about what, you know, the whole day, like what had happened. And I was like still upset that I got the epidural. And she's like, you got a freaking epidural. She's like, who cares? She's like, you labored all the way to 5.5 centimeters. And she's like, not many women can do that and whatnot. And I was like, okay, I know, but I still didn't want the epidural. But anyway, so she's like, let's do some practice pushes. So we did some practice pushes. And before that, the nurse that was there, I was like, oh, maybe I'll have the baby before your shift is over. Like her shift was over at 7 a.m. And she goes, oh, honey, you're a first-time mom. You might be pushing for 2 to 3 hours. And I'm like, why would you say that to me after everything I've gone through? Like, oh my God. But anyways, I was just like not mentally prepared to push to be in labor for 2 or 3 more hours. She's like, the baby will be here by lunchtime. And I'm like, I am having this baby by 10 a.m. I said that. And so started doing some practice pushing around 9:20-ish, 9:25. And at this point, like my mom's back in the room and my doula's there. And so I think it was by the 3rd round of practice pushes that they were all like, oh my God, we see hair. And like Matt just loses it and like starts like just sobbing. He's like, oh my God, you're almost there. And just like this intensity like came over me. Like I was in this like really hard workout and I needed to finish it strong. And so I pushed so hard. Like I was like, oh my God, I'm almost there. And I had only pushed like 5 minutes at this point, maybe. And so I was so excited that I was almost there. The doctor like got her delivery scrubs on. And like, honestly, like the next couple rounds, like she was like, the baby was starting to crown. And she was just like, hold on. Like, I'm gonna like eat. Cause I was like, I got this part. Like I can do this. This is my shit. Because I just felt so strong pushing. And, I had a mirror so I could see she was like massaging my perineum, trying to like make sure I didn't tear too terribly, which didn't happen. But at one point I couldn't see anymore because there were so many nurses and things in front of the mirror, but the baby's head was out and I could hear the baby crying like before the rest of the body was out. And so then the rest of the body came out, and you know what I didn't know at the time was her arm was like this, covering her face. And so my OB was struggling to like get her out, so like turned her, and then her arm flung out like this. So just remember this for a little later in the story. So gets the baby out, and I was like, what is it? And Matt's like, it's a girl. And everyone's like screaming because everybody in the room thought it was a boy because it was such a big baby, and put her on my chest, and she looked like me, and I'm like, oh my God. And just such an incredible moment. I'll put the video at the end of this. It's the initial, here's your baby. I was like, thank you for coming out of me. And if you're a Friends fan, you'll get that. So they took her over to like check her to make sure she was good with like meconium and everything, which she was. They measured her. She was 8 pounds, 14 ounces, 21 inches long, big girl. And then they brought her back over to me and she latched right away. So we did our first nursing session and Matt was there and my mom was there. And it was just that first hour, I was just literally like, oh my God, this was like, this was inside me because she was like huge. Well, you know what I mean? I was just like, oh my God, like it was just really indescribable. Everybody tells you that you forget like about pain and what you went through, and they're totally right. Like literally it was like nobody else was in the room. It was me and, you know, Evelynn and Matt, and that was it. And so for that first hour, I was just staring at her and like amazed at like what my body just did, and like felt like okay in everything that had happened because it just didn't matter anymore because she was there and she was healthy and she was perfect and she was like pink and beautiful. And then at one point I looked up and I was like, am I okay? I didn't realize what was happening down there, but my feet were in stirrups and there was a surgical lamp and like my OB's down there like basically performing surgery on me. And I was just so blacked out from everything but, you know, Evelynn and like Matt that I had no idea what was going on. But it turns out that when she came out and her arm, the way that her arm flung out, her elbow scraped my cervix on the way out. So she tore part of my cervix and I had a grade 2 perineal tear and like a little vaginal tear a little bit higher up. So I tore in 3 different places. And my mom said she was paying attention. She's like, I was paying attention because like I wanted to know what was happening to you. And I was losing a lot of blood. They kept on like yelling out the amounts, the nurses. Again, I'm just like, no idea that this is happening. But Matt was just like, there was blood all over the floor. There were like huge towels soaked, like they were weighing them to see how much blood you were losing. Like it was bad. Like, so I was hemorrhaging and I had no idea because I was just so infatuated with my baby. I mean, if you're a mom, you just kind of know that. So I was then I got to be, after that hour that she was on my chest, I was kind of like, what's going on with me? Like, am I okay? She was probably down there for a good hour and a half. No joke. So she came back up to my head and I was like, am I okay? Like, am I going to be okay? And she was like, honey, you might need some pelvic floor physical therapy. And I was just like, that's okay because I planned on it anyways. But she had told me like where I tore, just not to the extent. I didn't really find that out until like my 2-week visit. And I'm gonna do a separate video about my postpartum experience, but this was just the birth story. So yeah, quite traumatic there at the end, with how she came out. Cause I only it was 15 minutes of pushing and she was out. So, it's just the way that she came out was very disruptive on my pelvic floor. But I honestly, now that it's been like 8 weeks, she's almost 2 months old and I'm just recording this. And obviously you can see I still get a little emotional about having to get the epidural, but now I'm just so accepting of it because of how it went down. And I would not have been able to withstand having surgery down there if I didn't have an epidural. Like at one point, my mom said she yelled over for them to turn on my epidural because they had turned it down for when I was pushing. So I'm grateful I got the epidural because I got so much time with Evelynn. They probably would have taken me to an OR had I not had an epidural. Just, you know, all the what ifs, right? All of those scenarios. And I played the what ifs in my head so many times. And it's hard to like not think about it, because I had thought about, you know, the home birth route and the birthing center route, and I'm very grateful that I was in the hospital. I'm very grateful for our medication, because I might have been that like one person that like dies in childbirth because I hemorrhaged so bad. I ended up losing almost 2 liters of blood. Luckily, I did not need a blood transfusion, but I did have 2 iron IV bags once they transferred us over to the mother and baby floor. So I am okay with what happened and how it went down. I think everything happens for a reason, and I think I needed that epidural to get through and to have the energy to push her out, even though I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep for like 3 days, let's be honest. I didn't sleep, you know, the Wednesday before I went into labor. I didn't sleep Thursday because I was in labor. And then Friday I didn't sleep because we were in the hospital and I was in so much dang pain. But that is going to be the next video. So I told you this would be long. It's about 30 minutes. So just consider it 1 minute for every hour that I was in labor. So there's my birth story. And postpartum, I'm going to do in a separate video. And this one will be probably a little graphic and intense. My postpartum experience has been pretty rough. And part of it is because of the injuries that I sustained. But I will get into that more in the next video. So thank you for hearing Evelynn's birth story, and I'm glad she stayed sleeping for this entire thing. She is just such a great baby. I love her so much. My whole world is completely flipped upside down in the most beautiful way. And even though birth was so rough and like totally rocked me, I got this beautiful, perfect little girl out of it. So I wouldn't change a thing. So if you've listened, thank you so much. And hopefully you'll be watching my next video on my postpartum experience. So stay tuned for that.
Thank you for coming out of me. Oh my God.
You're in a minute.